Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. I know we're getting off of a couple weeks of some of the most mind-blowing news, and I promise to talk about all of the tariffs next week in my solo episode. But this week, I wanted to bring everybody a little bit of good news. This week, we'll be talking with Katya, a co-founder of the app Overlap, an app that helps users to identify who their representatives are, what legislation they're voting on, and how to get involved. Overlap's mission is to deliver unbiased information to constituents and help them explore their political opinions over time. The app is currently available in the iOS App Store and has launched in New York City, with more cities coming soon. Katya has a bachelor's in media studies from NYU and is from New York. She's passionate about exploring how media shapes our society and how emerging technology can play a role in redefining how we communicate. I found Katya through a viral video that she had on TikTok. I came across the video as I was doomscrolling on my For You page, and in the video, she talked about creating the app to overcome the kind of political hopelessness and driving up political engagement. The video made me feel like we aligned a lot and that our missions were pretty similar. So I shot her an email and she ended up responding and wanting to come on. So I'm so excited to be bringing you this episode. Katya is incredibly kind, incredibly motivated, and she really is building something that I feel like will have a huge impact on the United States and how informed voters are, and also greatly expanding how easy it will be for voters to get information. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Katya from Overlap. Katya, thank you so much for coming on. I am so excited to have you on here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start kind of big and broad. Who are you and what in the world is Overlap?
Who am I? Great question. Well, I'm Katya. I'm from New York. I'm 23. And I am the co-founder of Overlap. And I recently, about a year ago, graduated from NYU and decided to start this company. And Overlap itself is an app where we focus on the overlap between you and your representatives. And the app basically allows you to kind of see who all your current representatives are, who candidates are for upcoming elections. It tells you about all the legislation that people are working on, helps you track what you agree and disagree with, gives you an alignment score, which is a huge part of the app, to tell you how much you match up in terms of your opinions as opposed to your representatives. And it also gives you a bunch of different ways that you can connect with your reps, whether it be going to events, messaging them, connecting with them on different social media platforms. There's a bunch of ways that you can really get involved locally.
When you say messaging them, does that mean like attaching their office phone numbers or like general emails?
Sure. So there's different ways that we've explored kind of being able to message or connect with politicians. Most recently, my co-founder and I have been discussing adding a feature where anytime you want to connect or talk to a representative, instead of going on their site and, going through all the messaging tactics that you have to fill out your name, your phone number, where do you live, what is your complaint? We make it easier and kind of do like a text-based option. So it feels kind of like you're texting the politician. And then we can consolidate that. Yeah, we can consolidate that on the politician's end so that they can see, X amount of people wrote to you about this, X amount of people wrote to you about that, so that they have an easier way to consolidate what their constituents are worried about. But, it can also be a positive place, a place for you to leave a compliment or say, I really like that you did this or that. We think it could be a really great way to, both give positive reinforcement to the people that are doing things to make our government a better place, but also a great way to let them know what they could improve on.
For sure. I mean, I've always been a huge proponent on if you're unhappy about something, contact your representative. But unfortunately, like you said, like it is a little bit convoluted and weird and you have to fill out all this information. You kind of have to dig for it. So I think that with Overlap, I feel like to me, that's what I'm most excited about.
Interesting. That's very interesting because I've recently spoken to a lot of people, both our age and people that are much older. And for them, that was a huge part of the app, was being able to have all these resources in one place, whereas otherwise you'd have to go looking and digging and, it would take a lot of time. And who would go to those lengths unless you're incredibly passionate about something? Right. But breaking down those big communication blocks and really like clearing the path is, I think, what is really going to make a huge difference in the way that representatives and their constituents communicate.
So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what inspired you and your co-founder to create Overlap. Was there some big moment where you were like, oh my God, here's my idea? Or was it more of a well thought out and longer process?
I've always kind of been the kind of person to question, what big idea can we use to kind of shift the way things are going? And you and I kind of related on this a while ago when we talked. We were talking about, we grew up during a time when Trump came into power and media became so much bigger. You and I have both used social medias for probably the majority of our lives, and you are constantly being bombarded by political information. And it's very, very hard for you to kind of take a step back and reflect about what your own views may be, but also to be a good judge about what's happening and have an opinion or not have an opinion on certain issues. So that has always been in the back of my mind, this overwhelming feeling of I am being constantly bombarded by political media, and that's not necessarily a good thing. And it doesn't help me in any way, right? You would think the more information, the more helpful, but it actually has kind of a, how do I say this, opposing effect. So to give a little bit of background, when I was studying university, I studied media theory, and a lot of our classes used politics, especially American politics, as kind of a case study for how different people understand different messages through different media types. So one thing that I really remember studying diligently was during the first Trump term, how conservatives actually did a lot more research than the liberals ever did, which was very interesting to me because going to a liberal school like NYU, I had a completely different point of view to how conservatives got their information. And that really opened my eyes in terms of people seek out information, they want it. It's just the sources that we get it from and the way that we're able to remember the information that's important to us. It's very difficult to achieve that kind of ideal environment. So about a year ago, I was kind of sitting around and I was thinking, what would be a way to use tech to help facilitate a positive political media environment? And Overlap was just kind of the idea that came to mind, because to me, the biggest issue was you don't remember what anybody said or did, and you don't know anybody's agenda. So how can we put it all forward and consolidate that information into a way that's digestible for a person that doesn't have the time to go digging for it?
Love that. I think that, your whole why for why Overlap came to be is so important. Like you said, in a moment like this, in a moment where we are being inundated with information, the minute we wake up, you turn on the TV, you pick up your phone, and there's always some new breaking news story.
Right. It makes it incredibly difficult to form your own opinion, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And also, it blocks your creativity and positivity to solving some of the problems and issues that we face.
Right.
You kind of go into an anxiety-driven spiral rather than being like, okay, but what are our solutions? Where can we compromise so that we can move forward?
Right. And I mean, really, no one's immune from I'll admit it. I'm not
100%.
immune from it. I am a very evidence-based person. I like to pull my solutions from, articles or someone else's suggestion, but that also then becomes a problem when in a media sphere that's completely inundated with information.
Right. It's just hard.
So I'm wondering if you could talk about, in the journey to launching Overlap, what did you find to be the biggest challenge in getting it from an idea in your head to a tangible thing?
So I think there are two big challenges or two big categories for these challenges. One category is practical challenges that we faced, and the second is philosophical challenges that we face. So the first thing I'll talk about is the practical ones. This is a common theme for anybody that has ever created any sort of product, but when you come up with a big idea, it is exactly that. It is a huge idea, and you write everything down. And for me, it looked like creating the interface and every single button and everything that it would do. And it was something that looked completely different to what Overlap is today. So I had a lot of big goals, but to take yourself from that big idea and bring yourself down to something that's actionable and tangible is actually incredibly difficult. And what a lot of tech companies often struggle with is just distilling it down to the bare basics and asking yourself, well, what is the core product? What are we trying to hand over to users, and what do users truly want, right? Instead of just piling on features. So that was one huge barrier for us. Was it literally took us 6 months of talking it out and experimenting to bring it down to the product that it is today. So that was a practical challenge. The philosophical challenge, and it's challenges that we continue to face every single day, my co-founder and I, is we talk about what is our responsibility as an organization and what kind of values do we want to bring to the product and how do we uphold those values. And that to us is so critical because we know what kind of space we're getting into. Politics is the most emotional thing that you could, be participating in. And so we're very conscious of the kind of responsibility that we bear when we say we want to provide unbiased, clean information to people to help them make more informed decisions. And even when we ask ourselves the question, well, what kind of information do we provide? How much information do we provide? Those are all questions that are very philosophical and take a lot of difficult conversations and talking to a lot of different people to figure out.
Yeah, I think that's something I never even thought about from your perspective, but that is such a big one because I don't know. That was a really great answer. I'm gonna be honest.
Thank you. Well, I can't take all the credit. Honestly, when I posted the TikTok that you initially found me from, a lot of the comments and the people that reached out to me that I ended up having conversations with, they also brought up all these different concerns. And I realized that those concerns, I can't fit every single feature that anybody would ever want into the product because some of the things are just not what I envisioned the product to be or the responsibility that the product bears. But nonetheless, it's if you want to facilitate that space for somebody, it's still a huge responsibility to bear. And you want to make sure that you are, going into it in good faith and really doing your best to not cut corners and think it through. Because I think one of the huge things for us is that we want everyone to be able to trust us. At the end of the day, what we're making is a product for people, period. We're not making this for liberals or conservatives or independents. We are making this for people, period. So for us, it's so important that there is a level of trust and that if we do mess up at some point, that mistake, can be taken in the context of we are really trying to build this for everybody and you're never going to please everyone. But if we can make something that, helps at least some population of people, then we've completed our mission.
You and me both, girl. You and me both. So I know you mentioned that overlap was kind of born out of frustration with political hopelessness in the media sphere. How do you feel that overlap helps combat that kind of feeling?
Yeah. So I think hopelessness in and of itself comes from a lack of understanding, lack of information, context, and also lack of next steps or actionable items. And I only realized this when I was showing a very early version of the app to one of my friends. And she was like, I love this. This is great. It's giving me all the resources. And then she told me, but I would walk away from this app feeling incredibly downtrodden because if the things that I'm seeing in the legislation are not things that I agree with or things that freak me out, how do I step in? And that was a really huge turning point for us with the product because we were like, that is one of the philosophical responsibilities we have to bear is if we're giving people all this information, we also have to give them an outlet to take the steps that they need to take to feel like they can participate or shift the course of what's happening because they live in a democracy. So one of the ways that we do that is all of the legislation that you see in the app is categorized into two different categories. You have ongoing legislation and legislation that's already been passed. Every time you get a voting pack, which is just a pack of 10 votes of things that are most recently happening within your government, we always are going to prioritize that stuff that's ongoing so that you are never blindsided by law. Often when we hear about something happening in our government, it's laws that have already been passed and you are sent into panic mode because you're like, oh my God, this is already legal. What do I do?
I didn't even have the opportunity to say how I felt. Yeah.
Right. And it's oh, now it's a big deal now that it's passed into law and everybody's coming out and telling me, well, I told you so. And you're like, I never heard about this. And it's a whole situation, right? So for us, what we tried to do is that every time we give you a piece of ongoing legislation, there is a frame of time of about 2 months, even more, where that legislation is, on hold until they get the ability to discuss it and they get the ability to revise it. And a lot of people don't know this, but you can go into local council meetings and talk to these representatives about the laws that they have introduced. And that is part of the functionality of the app. You can flag any legislation that you're particularly interested in, and the app will alert you when that meeting is being held so that you can go in and voice your opinion. And
that's
I think
awesome. That is awesome.
I think so too. I think, the kind of thought or the hypothesis behind that is that it gives you a level of control or a feeling of control that you can participate, but it also gets you out there with people who may support or not support that law, and it gets you talking to people. So I'll give you an example. My best friend, bless her, is in an endless war with e-bikes in New York City. It is mayhem. We have a lot of cyclists here, and they are both in the street and on the sidewalk, and they're running red lights, and it's Armageddon for the e-bikes. And for somebody like her, who's like really passionate about getting some regulations for these e-bikes, she could flag a piece of legislation and go into that meeting and say, hey, these are all the ways that I've been affected by this, and this is why we need these regulations. On the other hand, in that meeting, she could also encounter people that ride e-bikes for a living. Like we have a lot of delivery people here in New York City. Mm-hmm. Those are the primary users of a lot of our e-bikes. And that is why they're constantly rushing. They're on a deadline. So her being able to hear from those people may actually revise how she feels about it. And the consensus and the compromise and the revision that happens to that legislation is the result of many different viewpoints, as opposed to somebody that's far removed from the situation, like just a representative. You get to hear a lot of points of view. And I think that is the most critical aspect of the app. It pushes you to confront people who have different perspectives, and it pushes you into a place of compromise rather than defensiveness.
Well, right. And I think compromise is a lot easier when you're talking face to face. You and I both know
100%,
that the comments on social media love to be combative, but it's so easy to fight, hold strong for your position and, battle the keyboard warriors. But once you get face to face, like that's the real measure of work.
Yes. And I think one of the things that people don't realize, especially in the United States, and one of the things that I hope to get the word out about while we're still operating on just a local level, is that you actually have the most power on a local level. Things that affect you the most, like public safety and transportation and schools and healthcare, a lot of that comes from the local level rather than the state or federal level. And so getting people involved in that, I think the more people get involved, they'll realize just how much power they have in the democracy and how important it is for them to actually use their voice. Because I think we constantly hear people on social media go, use your voice, go out and vote. And, I've interviewed so many people for user interviews for a product that said, I didn't vote in the last presidential election because honestly, I didn't think it mattered. Or I didn't, like either of the candidates. And I can understand where they're coming from, because if you never see the effect of your voice, how can you feel like it matters? So what I hope to do with Overlap is to bring that kind of confidence back to people and get them talking again. Because as much as we like to think, so many people are involved, why would I be involved? It's actually a very, very slim percentage of people that are involved. Like in New York, for example, and this was absolutely shocking, the last mayoral election in New York City, our voter turnout was something like 27% in New York City. And it's really expensive here. Like people pay a lot in taxes. You'd think you want to vote, but it's, and there's so many barriers for why that happened. Most shockingly, 11% of people our age voted, the lowest, the lowest by far.
Right,
so
that's sad.
It's upsetting, but you also have to ask yourself, like, is it really the young people to blame or the news to blame? Or like, is it that we're just not getting the information that we need in order to make those decisions? And I just think it's, it's a combination of all those things.
Right. Okay. So one thing we talked about a little bit earlier was about the issue of misinformation and disinformation. Right. You've said that you want to make sure that Overlap is misinfo and disinfo free.
Right.
I'm wondering if you could talk about how you are ensuring that happens.
Right. So I think part of the most, the core feature of the app is that we are pulling legislation directly from how it is phrased in your local government. So we do not we are hands off at Overlap. Our motto is there is no editorial aspect to the information we provide for you. So when you are getting information about a certain piece of legislation that's being introduced, the title of that legislation and the contents of that legislation are being conveyed to you in the direct language that they were conveyed in the official government record. We don't touch that. One of the features we provide is that we use artificial intelligence to help us pull some of the terms that may not be known to the vast majority of users, and we help to define those terms. So I'll use a buzz term that's been in the media recently, Department of Education, right? A lot of people don't actually know what the Department of Education does or what they're responsible for. So what the AI would do is it pulls the definition and says, hey, this is what the Department of Education is, and these are their responsibilities. Or, for example, the word blockchain, like New York City wants to use blockchain in some sort of government tech. We would pull the word blockchain and we would say, hey, this is what this is, just so that people don't feel confused. But that is the only way in which we kind of have a hands-on approach. But it's really not us that's writing those definitions. Those definitions are as unbiased as can possibly be. And that is just one of the ways in which we try to, not shift or change anything that's happening.
Right.
We are literally just here to help you get this information. We're not here to translate it to you. We're not here to tell you to think this or that about it. It is literally just you make the decision,
right,
and then you can go forward from there.
Right. It just seems like a place to, kind of consolidate everything where like you can go
100%.
forth. I mean, even just with watching the news, period. Like you watch the news, and if it's a good news station, they won't be that biased. And then it's up to you to go forth into the world and act on it, form your opinion, whatever it is.
Right. And we also don't filter any of the laws that are going through. So like if there is a person pushing a certain agenda or like all of the laws that you see are all the stuff that's passing through your local government. Nothing is being filtered or not shown to you. And in fact, if there is an issue that you're particularly concerned with, we also have voting packs that are issue based. So you can look into that as well. So there is no filtering of information. We don't leave anything out. And part of the app is actually, we don't show you what's Democrat, what's Republican, what's independent. We don't let you group yourself before you're able to make your own informed decision, just so that we allow you the space to breathe and think about it and consider what it would mean to you if this law got passed. Not what it would mean to everybody else, not what it would mean for your political party, what would it mean to you?
That's so awesome. we talked about this a little bit in our initial phone call about how I feel like I know some people that are Republican in name only, but not in the Congress rhino sense, but in the sense that they feel that they have to identify with the Republican Party. But really, when you speak to them on the person-to-person basis, a lot of what they're spouting is Democrat ideals. And for some reason, they just can't cross that bridge. I'm sure maybe there is a case in the opposite. That's just the example that I have. But to show it without any party affiliation, I think is so huge and so integral to bridging the gap that we have now and really ensuring the human connection to the political and the craziness that we have here.
Agreed. Totally agreed. One of the features that is coming up that we're currently building out is actually like a flagging bias feature. So we don't necessarily encounter this on the local level because local politics people tend to be of the same party affiliation. It's really when you get to state and federal level that those affiliations may change and where a lot of the bias in how you write the laws may come in. But even in New York, we've seen examples where, our current Eric Adams's administration wanted to push a pack of laws, and the city council opposed it, and they both sent out pamphlets detailing what these laws are and what their implications are, but the two pamphlets were completely different. So of course they were. So a person who's trying to make that decision, that to me is really unjust. You can't, change that information and expect a person to be able to make an unbiased or informed decision when you're very clearly pushing them towards a certain answer. So by using the bias flagging feature, it's kind of like a user moderated thing where people can say, oh, you know what? I'm seeing an agenda here that I don't like. And that flagging will actually go directly to the government that writes that legislation so that they are aware that users know that something is up and so that they can make the change. And that kind of puts pressure on governments to, be as unbiased as they can when they're writing legislation.
As they should be.
As they should
be. So you're obviously making an app, which is tech.
Yes.
What role do you think tech plays and in the future should play in increasing civic engagement, especially for people around our age, the Gen Z, so to speak?
I think the word to use here that's used by absolutely anybody else in tech is access, but I think it is a word that really encapsulates what technology can do for civic engagement. Reason being, a lot of people have phones, and a lot of people, and I'm saying this in the United States, have internet connection. They already have the medium through which they can receive information. So I already have access to whoever has an iPhone, right? They obviously have to choose to download Overlap, but making the assumption that, they've seen it and they want to download it, they have access to that information. I think when we talk about the role that technology has to play in helping us increase civic engagement or bringing us together, facilitating communication, we also have to think about why we use this format instead of another format, right? And when I was first exploring this idea, I did a lot of user interviews, and I realized that a lot of people get their political information through very different mediums. So somebody who's, in the boomer generation, for them, they get print mail, and that is the way that they like to digest political information. For somebody a little younger, maybe they like to watch Fox News or CNN. A little bit younger, they like to watch podcasts. Somebody our age goes on TikTok or Instagram. What is somebody that is a generation lower? How are they going to digest political information? Everybody's different. You can't expect them all to receive information through the same medium and digest it evenly. So, in the way that technology can help, especially young people, increase civic engagement, you have to meet people where they're at. That's like first rule of marketing. You got to meet people where they're at. And people are on their phones. Young people are on their phones. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, and somebody like you see that. So, you started a podcast and you post about it, and you're on TikTok and you're on Instagram, you're on Spotify, you're everywhere, and you're meeting people where they're at. That's kind of the role that I think technology has to play. We first create the infrastructure for people to be able to access that information, and then we give them that information, right? So I think tech is actually an incredible way to do that. We have all these resources at our hands. It's just figuring out the best way that you can use that technology. And that's what we tried to do with Overlap. We really thought about what aspects of technology can we use to pull information and consolidate it in a way that's better than what we have today. And one of the ways that we chose to do that is we ask the technology to remember what happened for us. Because I think our biggest shortcoming in politics is that we can't possibly retain all the information about everything that happened, right? We consider only something that happened recently. We can't go back and weigh that. So Overlap does that for you. And I think it's not to pat myself on the back, but a great way for you to remember information and remember what you felt about something that happened so that it's not weighed any differently from something that happened recently, right? You want to get a good judgment of everything that's happened so that you can make a more informed decision.
Right. So I want to move on now to kind of what differentiates Overlap from everything else we have out there that helps us kind of organize our ideology. What makes Overlap different than some of its competitors or some of the things that are similar to Overlap?
So I actually, before I started Overlap, was looking for solutions like Overlap, and I had a really difficult time finding anything. It was only after I posted the video on TikTok explaining what Overlap does that people were like, oh, I have something along those lines in my country. Or, there's an app that came out in 2016 that does this, but, they never really went too far. So I think Overlap combines both me and my co-founder's biggest strength, and also it has a very clear underlying mission. I come from a marketing and social media background, so to me, it's really critical that the way that we visually brand the app, the way we speak about it, the way we speak about politics in general, facilitates a culture of excitement and action rather than something boring or, unsexy. We don't want any of that, but we don't want it to be anxiety inducing either. So that's important. Presenting that topic of politics already so packaged with, different
Lots of
contexts.
feelings.
And yes, exactly. Bringing that into a completely different box and handing that to people. The second thing is using that technology that we have now. So I mentioned that we use AI. We use AI to both pull the information that's coming in, but also to help us define some of the terms and, guide us. So that's obviously a pretty recent development. And I hate to use AI as a buzzword. We don't use it in any of our marketing specifically because this is not like an AI native app. It's infrastructure. It's the way you would use, a faster car instead of a horse and buggy to get you from one place to another, right? And then
also you just talked about like the alternative would be like you guys writing your own explanations,
right.
and
right.
then you have people calling you biased. So like,
right.
pick one.
Right. And then the last aspect of, I think, what makes overlap different in this case is that for us, it was important, again, the memory part of it, being able to remember your opinions, look up things that you're interested in, categorize them. It's just, you're dealing with a really, really big chunk of info that you cannot retain. So I think what overlap does that I've not seen any other app or, technology do is that it retains it in a way that helps you already gauge how you felt about certain things. And it remembers for you. And I think that is probably one of the most useful things, honestly, that it does. Plus, I think the interface is kind of nice. So, it's good to use it. It's good. It's important to me. I'm like an artist. It's important to me that things are pretty and they're fun and they're great to look at. And, if you really don't mess with whatever is inside the app, that at least it's fun to scroll through and to use. So, all of those things in combination, just using everything that we can to make it appealing and fun. And again, as distance from what people consider political as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, what you said about like the visual of it, I think that's so on target because when I was working in social media before, they'd be like, what are you bringing to us? And I'm like, make it look pretty. Like you make it look
taste,
visually.
Girl.
If you make something look visually appealing, people are going to stick around.
Like, right.
A lot of
we're a visual culture. We love pretty things.
Right.
We love a PR unboxing. We love we love it all. Like anything that looks great, we're like, give it to me.
Right. So I don't think, I mean, it's a shallow thing for people to care about, but you're so on the money with that. And, even I'm not in New York, so I don't have the app, but even in the video where like you were, showing the like bits and pieces of the app, like I'm like, oh yeah, that looks cute. I would like to go there.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I always I'm tinkering with the interface, so I'm always like, no, this could be better. Not enough color here. So I've heard some positive things about the interface, so I'm glad to hear that you feel that way. But hopefully we'll get like an actual UI UX designer down the line who can help us tinker with it a little bit further, because
so it's not just a one-woman show.
Not a one-woman show, definitely not, yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the app personalizing engagement by tracking alignment with officials. Can you explain how that works? What is that aspect of the app?
So there's kind of two layers to it. On the very basic level, what we do is suppose that your politician voted on 10 different laws, and they voted yes on 3 of those laws, and you voted yes on 3 of those 10 different laws. Your alignment score would be 100% because you agreed 10 out of 10 times on your opinion on different laws. Obviously, when they agree with something you disagree with, that alignment score goes down. And then over time, as they vote and you vote across their term, that alignment score gets more and more specific. Now, the second level to this is that in the app, we actually ask you to prioritize your top 5 issues, right? So instead of, choosing 1 or 2 issues that are like hot button issues or issues that somebody is running on, you're saying, okay, to me as a person, what really matters most? Perhaps I care about public safety and, I take the bus to go to work. So transportation matters to me. I have 2 kids. I don't personally, but I care about public schools, stuff like that. So I rank my top 5, and then we actually weigh those as 50% of your final score. So we give those issues more weight. So if you agree, a lot with your representatives about a lot of different issues, but on those core 5 issues, you guys actually differ a lot, that will reflect more severely in the alignment score. And it kind of helps you gauge on the very critical things that matter to you, whether you like a person so much and you think they're so great, you just might not align with them and they might not be serving your needs specifically. And that is basically how those alignment scores are calculated.
Every time you say something about this app, I'm like, that's so awesome. I never would have thought about that. Of course, the issues that you care about more should, weigh more on the alignment score, but like, jeez.
No, but it's true. And I remember, I think you and I had this conversation a while back where we talked about, single issue voting being a huge, huge problem, especially with recent elections. And it's important to me that people really take the time to consider beyond the hot button issues that they're seeing in the news. What is the stuff that affects them the most, that if it went downhill tomorrow, that it would take a huge bite out of your life? That's really important. I think a lot of people don't take the time to consider that.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think alignment score, again, like, yeah, you align on some things, not on others, but to use your personal beliefs to measure you up against the politician that you have elected is like, that's amazing.
Thank you. And what's great is we actually give you a rundown of those scores. So like, you don't just select those top 5 and then you never see them again. When you click on your representative, you can actually see a breakdown of like, hey, how much, my total alignment score may be 60%, but like, how much do we match up on housing? Maybe it's 40%. How much do we align on public safety? Maybe it's 30%. So you really get a detailed breakdown so you can make more informed decisions and maybe even know what to ask those politicians when they're coming up for re-election. What do you want them to focus on, etc.
Right. I'm obsessed.
Thank you.
I'm obsessed.
I'm obsessed too.
I want to move on now to talk a little bit about where we see overlap going in the future. So we've mentioned overlap is now live in New York City. So for all my New York listeners, you can go ahead and download overlap right now.
Yes.
But do you have any plans for wider expansion than just New York?
100%. So New York we chose because the timing just was right. We have a mayoral election coming up in November. It's the biggest city in the United States, so we're kind of using it as the testing ground to see how can we make this better? How does this work during a campaign? Because a part of our app will be, giving you all the candidates and when is the election coming up and what are those candidates' agendas. That's another half to our app that nobody has seen yet because there's haven't launched that aspect yet. Yeah, there's no election yet. So once we, get a good grip on what's happening in New York, we're going to expand very quickly. So we have all the infrastructure on the back end to just plug in different cities. And I think the biggest barrier for us going forward will just be to attract all the different politicians and bring people onto the app. But I think as we expand, it'll be easier as we go and hopefully more people will hop on. Once we go nationwide on the local level, we're then going to expand to state level and then hopefully in about 4 to 5 years beyond the federal level so that by the next presidential campaign, you'll be able to at least have some sort of beta version of our app that will help you interact with the federal election through overlap. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's one thing that everybody can look forward to in 2028 is that overlap should hopefully be nationwide and on the federal level.
See you guys in 3 to 4 years.
So just to clarify, local stuff first, and then you're going to work your way up. Okay. So everybody should be on the lookout for their local stuff first. That's 100%. Actually a great way to do it because you just said, the most important part is local election.
Get into it, guys. Yeah. Build a habit, interact civically, and then you'll get the luxury of participating on the state and federal level. Withholding that. I'm joking.
No, that's a good way to put it. Everybody, you have to behave. You have to go vote in your local elections. Go vote for the school board.
Show us how bad you want it, and maybe we'll give it to you.
Maybe you will get access to your senators.
Exactly.
So going off of that, I know you're still growing, you're still expanding. Are there any future features or partnerships you're working on now that you are particularly excited for Overlap to get into?
Yeah, so because we just launched the very first version of Overlap, we are building out our features fast. The features that I'm most excited about is the favorites feature where you get to flag, laws that are critical to you, and we give you notifications of when that law has passed and when you can, go and to the council meeting and talk about that law. So that is a really, really big one for us. I think in terms of partnerships, we've been talking to a lot of representatives, but also people that are candidates in the upcoming election, because beyond mayor, we obviously also have city council and we have city comptroller. We have a bunch of people that are coming up for election or re-election. So we've been talking to a lot of people about, onboarding them onto the app and helping them really use the resources and the tools that we have so that they can better interact with their constituents.
Love it. So I know you said 4 years, hopefully you'll be federal, but 5 years from now, what impact do you hope that overlap has on American politics?
Great question. Loaded question. That keeps me up at night.
The last one has
Hard
to be
hitter.
deep.
I'm going to try to hit it out of the park. No, but in terms of the impact, I think the kind of mission and the philosophy that we came in with overlap was that we wanted to change the culture that has been built around political media and the way that people interact with politics, right? We live in a democracy. We have all the tools to participate and to really drive change, but there's been a certain stagnation and we're going over the same things over and over again. And I think for us to really make progress and see, the road ahead, it's critical that we come to understand each other and have conversations that we are just not having today. So my goal and my hope is that overlap will just be a part of a much bigger movement that drives people to create new spaces, new technologies, new fields in order to interact with each other and have more efficient political conversations, but also to reshift the focus that we currently have in politics, which is an us versus them, towards an us versus a big problem. Because how I always picture it is, we like to think that we're on opposite teams in different offices, but we're actually all sitting in the same company at the same table, trying to decide the future of where we want to go. And for that to be the case, we have to be able to come together, understand each other, but also to facilitate new spaces, because I just don't believe that the media environment we have today works or serves us in this sense. It may serve us in terms of like celebrity news or, pop culture. It doesn't serve us in the political sense. I actually think it sets us back. So the hope is that overlap will introduce, just a new voice into the conversation about how we process political information and how we engage with each other and how we understand the role of politics in our day-to-day lives.
I mean, politics is, everything is political at the end of the day.
Everything.
You walk outside, you drive on your road, that's political.
That's political.
That was something that was voted on and decided on.
Right.
And, I think you're right. The media general large ecosystem that we have right now is not serving us in the most beneficial or efficient way. And I think a lot of that, I've listened to a couple podcast episodes on this, is, the media companies, Washington Post has been bought by bigger media companies.
Right.
And then they're all serving the parent company's interests, which aren't inherently interested in being sued or whatever it may be. And I think that's why we see the rise of more independent writers on, what's that, Substack? Like, that's a huge place now for, my mom loves to get on the Substack and read news from there.
Okay.
And I think that overlap kind of falls into that same sort of category of, it's not traditional news media. And I am a person that still generally trusts media, but I do still think that independent spaces are so integral, especially with where we are now, to fostering conversation and making sure that people are well informed.
100%.
And I think that you are doing a fantastic job, a commendable job at getting overlap into the hands of people that need it most, which I'm very politically informed. I keep up to date on the news, but I would still love to have overlap because I'm involved locally enough, but I'm sure there's still tons of stuff that I don't know that's going on locally.
And stuff you could benefit from or stuff you could get involved with. Like, I think one of the things that was so key to me when I was first digging into this was I was looking through all the stuff that City Council has passed in the last year. And I was like, New Yorkers love to complain. That's like the key thing that we do. So we're like, this road is bad and the damn e-bikes again and whatever, and the subway's closed down. But, there's actually a lot of good stuff that's going on. And it kind of, hope will reinforce people's confidence in government, because I think the idea right now is that government is this big bad, thing, and they're all trying to corrupt you, and they all have, secondary motives and whatever. Some may. I'm not saying everybody's hands are clean, but there is a lot of positive stuff that's going on, and a lot of things that people can actually get involved in and have a real effect on, if only they knew that they were happening. So I totally agree with you about independent spaces. That is like, overlap is point ABCD probably in the line of independent media and like new media prototypes that we're seeing emerge. So I totally agree with you. I think it's going to be really key for people to get involved with, different media sources and different ways completely of consuming media.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, like, question that I totally didn't send you before, but I think you'll be able to answer. Do you have a solution at this point for targeting people that are pretty politically disengaged? Like, how do you get people like that to even pay attention and want to learn what's going on locally?
100%. So I think one of the things that we know just in general is that there is kind of a trickle down effect from people who become like fanatic users to young people usually who adopt these technologies, and then it trickles down to everybody else. So my hope is that even if you really, really don't care what's going on in politics, I think at the local level, the more people that get on the app, the more conversations are going to be happening in communities, the more people who even are apolitical will want to get involved. Because I think the opinion right now of people that are quote unquote apolitical, they're like, they associate politics with things that they see on the television. It's really, really negative connotations. Some people don't feel that they're informed enough to even make, a decision. You're informed enough to say, hey, I wish there was a road going through town right now. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have an opinion on a foreign conflict. You may say, you know what, I don't know enough context to have an opinion on that, but you have an opinion about a road, or you have an opinion about, should your kid have access to free lunch in school? You have those opinions, and you should be empowered to know about legislation or things that are happening in your community to make those things happen.
Right.
So I think even if you deem yourself apolitical, the hope is that the culture that overlap is aiming to facilitate will kind of help get you out of that headspace that you don't care or don't want to make those decisions or don't want to get involved in like the dirty of politics, and to help you actually connect with your community, know more people in the local space, and kind of build upwards. Because even if you don't get involved on the state or federal level, local is, again, the most powerful. So that's where, it's in a way, paradoxically, I think going to be easier to get people involved locally than it is.
Okay, well, maybe that was a silly question then, because
No. It is a question I have been constantly, sleepless nights worrying about how am I going to get people on this app. But I really think it's going to be a network, face-to-face, word of mouth thing. It's really, I can't, there's no amount of marketing that I can do to get people on a quote unquote political app. But I think it'll really be just people talking about it and showing it to each other that will hopefully set off a domino effect.
Well, you just got to keep making TikToks and having them go viral.
And I got to keep cranking out TikToks. My co-founder, when I told him I was going to make TikToks and that was our primary form of marketing, he said, dear God, please don't make me do a TikTok dance. I said, you know what? If it has to come to that, it's going to come to that. And we haven't gotten to that yet. But you know what? If that's what I'm going to have to do.
No, if there's trouble brewing at Overlap, because Will and Katya are going to be dancing on TikTok.
Yes, the both of us are going to be learning.
Yeah, but I mean, TikTok is like the way to go nowadays. Like
100%.
I think it's so like cringy to post TikToks, but I do it because I know that's where people are.
Yes,
I know
you gotta meet them where they're at.
And that nowadays, like, people doomscroll through their TikTok, and that's where I've built like the bulk of my likes and start conversations. And TikTok's the place to be. Unfortunately, I think Will needs to get on that.
I think Will might need to hop on. It'll take a little bit of convincing, but I think in the end he'll have to crack. And like, TikTok was such an intentional decision for us, because I don't love to be like, in front of the internet. And the fact that we got like so many views was kind of shocking to me. I really didn't think that many people were going to see it. Maybe I would have made a more attractive video where I don't look like a little nesting doll. But But nonetheless, you're right. It's a great way to meet people where they're at. And it's also a great way to form connections and put a face to the project you're working on. Because again, politics can be so scary and intimidating. And I've gotten a lot of concerns about people talking about their data or like the unbiasedness of the app. And, you know, knowing that, hey, this is me and this is Will, and like these are the people that are building this application, I think really brings a level of like trust that you would not have otherwise had. And that's so critical that, you know, I have a feature in the app currently where people can write a complaint and it goes straight to my email inbox. Like, it's vital to me.
That might be playing with fire if you...
I'm aware. Actually, scratch that. Guys, don't write to me. I don't want to hear none of y'all. Like, leave it in the TikTok comments. I don't want it. No, but yeah, it's so critical.
That is critical. Like, I think it is valuable to hear people's complaints, but wild of you to have it go directly to your inbox.
Hey, listen, if you find where that submission form is in the app, you've gone digging enough and you are rewarded by getting a direct response from me.
That means
otherwise,
you really had a problem if you had to go find that button.
Exactly. And I want to hear about it. So, yeah.
Ugh. Okay, well, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you.
Like I said earlier, if you're listening to this and you're in New York City, you can download Overlap right now and stay up to date on everything going on there at the local level. And if you're not in New York, then we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer. But
guys,
we've been assured,
please. Don't worry, it'll be launching soon. The only thing I will say is just make sure that you're following us, and we actually have a newsletter sign up on our site. So go there, it's literally on the first page, sign up, and we won't, trash your inbox. You will literally only just get an alert about when it's live in your city, or you can download the app and you'll just get a push notification when it's live in your city. So you may not be able to use it, but yeah.
Oh, I'm going to download it right now. I thought I was waiting for
click leave.
Well, for some reason I thought granted I didn't try, but I thought if I searched up in the App Store, it wouldn't even show up. But okay.
No, it shows up.
We'll be downloading.
Guys, it shows up. You can definitely see it. You can see our 2 reviews, one of which is a 1-star review. Number 1 hater, I know where you're at and I'm gonna find you. And we will send you a push notification. But if you don't just want to have it lingering on your phone in the meanwhile, just either follow us or subscribe to the newsletter. You will get the notification.
Okay, perfect. I'll have the website and your social media will be linked in the show notes if anyone wants to check that out. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great. And guys, I just want to say Paige is doing an incredible job, and I hope you guys are subscribed. I hope you're following her on Spotify. I don't know what the Apple podcast situation is, but I hope you're following her on Spotify and you're leaving her a 5-star review. I know I am. And thank you for having me on. This was great.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. And thank you so much to Katya at Overlap for wanting to come on and discuss her app, which will be so awesome once we all have access to it. But for right now, my New York City girls and guys can download it right now in the App Store. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with somebody who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and remember to vote in your local elections. I will see you guys next week in the briefing room where we will be hashing out the tariff madness that happened this week.